Hey guys, FaceandFaceFitness.co.uk here today. Okay, in this video I'm going to go over something we saw quite recently in the World Boxing Super Series, which had in the absence of any live boxing going on in this lockdown, they had a video game simulation of the heavyweights, and the final was between Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. Now, Ali versus Tyson is probably the most talked about mythical matchup, fantasy fight matchup in boxing. There's a lot of debate on who would win, a prime Ali versus a prime Mike Tyson. So in this video, I'm going to go over an article I actually wrote. Well, let me see when I wrote this. I wrote this about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago. Who would win between Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson? It's also one of my most popular articles. Okay, so first off, boxing is a sport which creates superstars, more specifically the heavyweights. I don't think there's a bigger title in sports than the heavyweight champion of the world. Muhammad Ali is, after all, the most popular sports person in history, and in second place would probably be Mike Tyson. Ali was such a big figure that at one point he was even starring in DC Comics as Ali versus Superman. He was even sometimes, he referred to himself in a song as the Black Superman. Okay, and when it comes to Tyson, I don't think there's ever been a more explosive, a more intimidating, a more exciting fighter than Mike Tyson himself. So these two, for obvious reasons, most popular fighters of all time. Ali with his personality and his boxing skills, and Tyson with his just the way he came out and just was knocking people out. Explosive fighter, great fighter. So I'm going to go over who would win in a matchup between the two in this video, and let you know my views. Okay, so before I give my opinion, I will say that Ali and Tyson are my two favourite fighters. Throwing names like Mayweather Jr. on my t-shirt, Sugar Ray Robinson, Riddick Bowe, and these guys are my 5 most favourite boxers. So I don't particularly have a bias towards Ali or Tyson when discussing this aspect of who would win, or debating who would win in a fight between the two. Also remember, Ali and Tyson were good friends. They both had a mutual respect towards each other. Ali would say Tyson would beat him in a fight. Tyson would say Ali would beat him in a time. So I think it's important we keep that in mind. They were not trying to downplay any of the other's achievements. They're both great fighters. They both had a respect for each other. Okay, so the other factor when we start the debate is, what is a prime Ali and what is a prime Mike Tyson? Okay, so in my article, in my opinion, Muhammad Ali was at his best just before he was banned from boxing for refusing to be drafted into the US military. So this is the Ali who fought the likes of Zora Foley, Ernie Terrell and Cleveland Williams. I think this was Ali at his absolute best, and he was getting better and better at that time. For Mike Tyson, then it has to be before his defeat to Buster Douglas. So we're looking at quite a young version of Mike Tyson here. But this, in my opinion, so the Ali in that sort of 66-67 period against Williams, Foley and Terrell, and the Mike Tyson before his defeat to Buster Douglas. That, in my opinion, is those two fighters at their very best. Okay, so we know the strengths of Muhammad Ali. Ali was exceedingly quick, extremely quick for a heavyweight. Up until that time, heavyweights weren't supposed to be that quick. They weren't supposed to throw punches so fast. They weren't supposed to move on their feet so quick. Okay, so Ali, his hand and foot speed probably still are unparalleled in heavyweight boxing. I don't think we've seen a heavyweight with that combination even now, over 50 years later, from a peak Ali in the mid-60s. For Mike Tyson, it was his explosiveness and his power. There have been heavyweights who punch harder than Tyson, George Foreman, Ernie Shavers, but no one threw punches with that power, at that speed, and threw those punches in bunches like Mike Tyson did. Extremely dangerous fighter. Also, Tyson being a shorter heavyweight, he had great head movement, and he often, when he made you miss, he made you pay. So he's a great counter puncher as well, great head movement, explosiveness, speed, power. Prime Mike Tyson was an absolute beast. Okay, so let's get down to some of the key areas and matchup between the two fighters. We always heard that saying, styles makes fights. So here's my rundown of float like a butterfly, sting like a bee against I want to eat your heart and I want to eat your children. Okay, so let's look at the matchup of styles. As I said, we're going to look at their prime periods, but we'll look at their careers as a whole because it does give us obviously important aspects of what they would do in specific situations. So Ali, as we discussed, was very fast. And Ali was more of an outside fighter. He used to enjoy, or he used to love flicking out his jab because he had lightning fast hands. And he would keep you at range with that jab and then come in behind the jab with his 1-2 or even a 1-2-1, which he often liked to do. Now Tyson, because of his height, he was a short fighter, he was a master of evading and countering the jab. So that would definitely give problems to Ali in the way Tyson would slip under that jab and come up with his screw jab or come up with that hook. But Ali did fight guys such as the former heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson, who was similar in style to Tyson. Of course, Patterson was trained by the same trainer as Mike Tyson, Custamato. So Ali fought Patterson twice, although we have to say that Patterson was past his best in those fights. I believe in the first fight, Patterson was 30 years old, which back in those days, 30 years old was pretty much past your prime. And then in the second fight, he was 37 and was about to retire. He didn't really, 37 when he fought Ali for the second time was his last fight actually. He didn't really give Ali any problems in that fight. So that's an example of of Ali fighting someone with similar style to Mike Tyson. Okay, and when it comes to Mike Tyson, he did at times struggle against boxers who would stick a move, which would be exactly how Ali would be fighting. And again, Tyson's head movement would sort of slow down as the fight wore on. Ali had a reach advantage of 7 inches over Tyson, and that would give Tyson some of the problems he faced undoubtedly against the likes of James Quick Tillis and also James Buster Douglas. And not to mention, there were guys like Holyfield and Lennox Lewis later in Tyson's career who gave Tyson's problems behind that, using that jab, keeping that jab in his face. Of course, by that time, Tyson's head movement was a shadow of what it was in his prime. But guys who utilised the jab and could move and tie you up, as Ali would do, they would give Tyson a lot of problems. So when it comes to styles, you've got to say Ali has that nod over Mike Tyson. Where Tyson does have the advantage, though, is his ability to throw that left hook. Now, Ali at times, as Eddie Feitch noted, would drop his punching hand, such as the uppercut. So when Joe Frazier, who was trained by Eddie Feitch, fought Muhammad Ali, they capitalised on this technical deficiency of Ali of always dropping the hands when he threw that uppercut, and Frazier managed to come in with that left hook time and time again and knock Ali down and win the fight on points. Again, Ali wasn't at his best at that time. He was coming off a 3.5-year layoff. That was his third fight in, so it's not really a prime Ali, but you've got to say, if that was Mike Tyson, then it's going to be could be a very difficult for him to avoid that left hook if he's showing those same tendencies. Now the next comparison is power, and there isn't really any comparison between the two. Ali was not a puncher, Tyson was a puncher, and Tyson would take you out early. He had plenty of first round knockouts. I mean, I'm not sure I can even name a fight where Ali won by first round KO. So there's no real comparison there. Ali versus Tyson, when it comes to power, Tyson wins all day, every day. I don't think there's ever been a more explosive puncher in boxing either, certainly not in the heavyweight division than Mike Tyson. But here's the problem with the argument of saying that Tyson had the advantage in power and that he could knock Muhammad Ali out. And the problem is Ali's chin. Ali took on the biggest punches we've ever seen in boxing, such as George Foreman, Ernie Shavers, Sonny Liston. He even fought guys such as Ron Lyle, who were big punchers. And none of these guys could knock Ali down, let alone knock him out. So why does anyone think that Mike Tyson could knock Muhammad Ali out if Ali's chin stood up against guys like Foreman and Shavers? Okay, so if you think, well, I think you're mistaken if you think Tyson could knock out Ali. I know people will say Tyson could possibly, his only chance of beating Ali would be to beat him early on, knock him out, because the longer the fight goes on, Ali would win. But there's no chance of anyone knocking Ali out early. It never happened. So you just cannot say that Tyson would be able to knock out Ali, especially a prime Ali who would be on his toes the whole fight, very difficult to keep up in those early rounds. Okay, so that leads me nicely onto my next point. Okay, so my next point concerns mental strength. Now, Tyson was a vicious fighter, no doubt in that. He was the one man you would hate to get into a fight with. I can't imagine anyone worse. If I was step into the ring, Tyson would be my absolute last opponent I'd ever choose. The guy was just brutal. Everything he did, especially at a young age, inside, outside the ring, he would go for you. He'd often beat his he'd often beat his opponents before the fight just through sheer intimidation. But if he couldn't bully you, if he couldn't impose his will, he'd often struggle in the fight, and especially as those rounds wore on. Ali, on the other hand, as we know, was the first to really employ those psychological tactics when fighting. Before the fight started, Ali would be coming out with every joke he could, every poem he could, just to throw you off your game plan. We saw this work best against Sonny Liston at the time, the heavyweight champion of the world. Liston was the most feared man in boxing. He had links to the mafia. He was a dangerous man. And yet Ali was this young, 21 years old, 22 years old, young brash fighter. And he was taunting Liston the whole time pre-fight. When the fight came on, Ali won that fight. Liston just couldn't keep up with him. And one of the reasons being, Liston likely wanted to knock him out to get him back for what Ali was saying. Okay, so the issue here would be that no one's going to be able to outsmart Ali, at least not in the heavyweight division. Ali was the best when it came to mental strength. With Ali's tactics before the fight, in how he would curse the fighters and poke fun at them. I mean, Joe Frazier, for example, never really forgave Ali for things he said. And Tyson, who was a loose cannon at the best of times at that age, he would probably go into that fight wanting to knock Ali out. His game plan would go straight out the window, and that would fall straight into Ali's lap. Ali would just fight on the outside, picking him off, wait for the right time to come in and throw some more punches. So that game plan, those tactics and mental strength, I think that would fall straight into Ali's hands. Okay, when discussing mental strength, you also have to take into account how a fighter responds when he's dragged deep into a fight, or as some would say, deep waters. Would he drown, or would he swim to the finish line with a victory? Ali was involved in numerous wars, most notably the thriller in Manila against Joe Frazier, where Ali said the fight was the closest thing to death he had ever experienced. So Ali was no stranger to lasting the distance, having to dig deep and finishing the fight. And of course, Ali was involved in 15-round wars, not 12 rounds, as were later on and during the career of Mike Tyson. Tyson, on the other hand, if he couldn't get you out of there early, he would often slow down as the fight wore on. He would lose his head movement and would be noticeably far less dangerous. I mean, how many times did Mike Tyson come from behind to win a fight? Ali came off the canvas numerous times, such as against Banks and Cooper, and he would even continue to fight with a broken jaw against Ken Norton. So Ali could get up off the canvas and win. He can also fight through pain with a broken jaw, as he did against Ken Norton. So when it came to mental strength, desire to dig deep, the heart and will to win, Ali was probably the greatest, if not the greatest, in that specific aspect. Ali had a huge heart. He never gave up. He just kept on going, never backed down. Great fighter when it came to his sheer will and determination to cross that finish line. One of the other things we can look at as well is the argument of Mike Tyson and his trainer, Cus D'Amato. Now, a lot of people say Mike Tyson would have been better had it not been for Cus D'Amato's death. Now, D'Amato unfortunately passed away pretty early on into Tyson's career. But the problem here, if we use that as an argument for Mike Tyson, is that we have to look at other fighters. Now, in this situation, according to discussing Ali and Tyson, we could say, well, Ali fought Jimmy Ellis. And when he fought Jimmy Ellis, then his coach, Angelo Dundee, was both the coach and the manager for Ellis. So for that fight, he was Dundee. It was in the corner of Jimmy Ellis, so Ali fought without his coach in that fight. In fact, Ali used a man by the name of Harry Wiley Sr. as his coach for that fight. Someone I made a video on his career as a trainer. Wiley Sr. of course trained the great Sugar Ray Robinson as both an amateur and a professional. So Ali fought without Dundee, had no effect on his style, his skills. In fact, he wanted to keep Wiley Sr. after the fight, but unfortunately Wiley Sr. passed away just a few months later. But again, we can also look at examples in history of one of the greatest heavyweight champions, maybe the greatest heavyweight champion of all time, in Joe Louis. Now, Joe Louis was trained by Jack Chappie Blackburn, also in the article I wrote on the greatest trainers of all time. Now, Jack Chappie Blackburn actually passed away during Joe Louis's career. I believe Louis may have been 42-1 or 47-1 when Blackburn passed away. But Louis continued for the rest of his career without Blackburn, won all of his fights until his first retirement. The only time Louis lost a fight was when he came back out of retirement, and he lost a couple of more fights when he was well past his prime, into his late 30s, when he shouldn't really have been fighting. But as a fighter, even after Blackburn's death, when he was continuing with the trainers he was using, he carried on winning, defending his title, and retired as a champion. So we can't really use the argument of Tyson would have been better, would have dominated with D'Amato. He had plenty of years with D'Amato. I don't think that's a valid argument. Okay, so the next point is the level of competition. Now, Ali, of course, ruled the heavyweight division in his golden era. In the 1960s and 70s, we had some of the greatest boxers of all time. We had Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, and Ali beat those three boxers. Ali beat them 5 out of 6 times. Not to mention other high quality fighters which Ali had to face, such as Ken Norton, Ron Lyle, Ernie Shavers, and Floyd Patterson and Archie Moore. Now, latter two, Patterson and Moore, were both past their best when they fought Ali. Moore was the greatest, arguably the greatest light heavyweight champion of all time, alongside Ezzard Charles. But still, those were great names that Ali competed against. Much of this came at a time when Ali was actually past his best. So you could say, yes, Patterson was past his best, Moore was past his best, but when Ali fought guys such as Shavers, Lyle, Foreman, Fraser and Norton, Ali was also past his best. The Ali of 1970s was very different to the Ali of the mid-1960s when he was at his peak. Okay, and the 60s and 70s, in my opinion, greatest eras of heavyweight boxing. The next period probably close to that would be the 90s, which Tyson was a part of. Possibly 90s is better than the 60s, but 70s definitely the best. So Ali was the king of the heavyweights in both the 60s and the 70s. When it comes to Mike Tyson, I'm not sure who is the best fighter that Tyson beat, and was that best fighter great? Ali beat Larry Holmes, of course, but Holmes again was well past his best, had come out of retirement. Larry Holmes was one of the best heavyweight boxers of all time, but when he fought Tyson, he was not close to his peak at all. There's also the case of fighters being avoided. We know, well, in rumours, that Tyson's team avoided fighters such as Tim Witherspoon and also George Foreman when he returned from his 10-year hiatus. That latter makes good sense when it comes to Foreman. I think Tyson's style was all wrong for George Foreman. Foreman, of course, dispatched easily of fighters such as Joe Frazier, who had a similar sort of swarming style, a lot of bobbing head movement. With someone like Foreman, if you like for a lot of uppercuts, that would be quite dangerous for a man like Mike Tyson. And the same can be said of Ali. Of course, Ali did beat Foreman, but there's no chance Ali was going to give Foreman a rematch after that rumble in the jungle, because Foreman would have learned from his mistakes, and who knows what would have happened in a rematch, especially with Ali still advancing in age, and Foreman would have been in his peak at that time as well. Okay, so looking at the resumes, we can see that Ali had by far the toughest schedule. It still came out on top in the 1960s when he was at his best, and came out on top again in the 1970s when he was past his best. So when it comes to competition, there's no doubt about it, Ali had the stronger competition. Okay, so those are my main areas, talking points when discussing who would win between Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. And Tyson would always have a chance against whoever he fought, especially a prime Mike Tyson, because he was so fast, he was so powerful, so explosive. He always had the potential to take you out no matter who his opponent was, even Ali. But when it comes to fighting Ali, in my opinion, was the greatest heavyweight of all time, and the styles make the fights. I could see Ali just dancing around the ring the whole time, waiting for Tyson to slow down and then pouncing on him, maybe with a late stoppage or winning on a wide, unanimous points win. 9 times out of 10 for me, Ali would win that fight. The other time, Tyson's great ability, that left hook, could force a stoppage on Ali, but again, as I said in the past, as I said previously in this video, stopping Ali, no one's ever done that. So to think anyone else in history could do it, I just don't see it happening. Either way, Ali, Tyson, 2 great boxers, 2 most popular boxers, 2 of my favourite boxers as well. And in my opinion, we're not ever going to see the like of either of those 2 again. I mean, Ali was the face. Is the face of boxing, the most popular sports person in history. Will we ever see a man like Muhammad Ali again make a global impact around the world as he did, a boxer making an impact as Ali did? And will we ever see this the same for Mike Tyson? The same for Tyson. Will we ever see a 20-year-old come out and dominate heavyweight boxing the way Tyson did? Will we ever see a heavyweight boxer like Tyson who was so explosive? Both of them were credits to the sport, great fighters. So those are my main talking points. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll leave a link to the article in the description as well. And hopefully you've enjoyed this video.